Ben Johnson is starting to fill out his Chicago Bears coaching staff with an impressive list of assistants, headlined by 3 former players with some impressive coaching experience.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can win $200 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. On the show today, I want to dive into some of the first assistants filling out Ben Johnson's staff. We'll talk about new quarterbacks coach JT Barrett, the former Ohio State quarterback who had a cup of coffee in the NFL. Then we'll talk about new wide receivers coach / offensive passing game coordinator Antoine Randle, former Super Bowl champion with the Pittsburgh Steelers and a Chicago area native. And then we'll wrap up looking at the defensive passing game coordinator and DBs coach Al Harris, who you may remember as a longtime Green Bay Packers cornerback, but he's coached up some impressive DBs throughout his NFL coaching career so far. I want to start with quarterbacks coach JT Barrett, though, because he's the one who's going to be hands-on with Caleb Williams, and that's going to be such a central focus of this season and the next handful of seasons, is how the Bears develop that young quarterback. And they've chosen to pair him with a young coach. And I think that's the interesting thing right off the bat. Like, JT Barrett is not an experienced coach. You know, this is not the veteran who's been around the NFL a while, coached a bunch of quarterbacks. JT Barrett himself is just 30 years old. There will be players on this Bears roster older than JT Barrett. He's been coaching in the NFL this will be his 4th season. Started with the Lions in 22 and then became assistant quarterbacks coach in 2023 and 2024. But he just stopped playing in 2022. Since the pandemic, his football career has ended. And a lot of his football career was derailed by injuries. Started with him back at high school, even he had injuries. And then in college, there were some injuries at Ohio State. And then in the NFL, couldn't get off the practice squad, and there were some injuries in there as well. It's been a tough kind of pathway for JT Barrett, and that's why he's a coach at 30 instead of still playing at 30. But you may recall, he is a national champion college quarterback. He was Big Ten MVP, 3-time Big Ten quarterback of the year, first team all Big Ten 3 times. He was a very, very successful college quarterback, and I think he's going to be able to relate to Caleb Williams in that way. Now, Barrett was undrafted. Caleb was a number 1 overall pick. There's some different pressures that Caleb experiences that JT Barrett has not. But I think Barrett will have good perspective on how a career can humble you a bit. Not that he necessarily had an ego that needed humbling, but just that, you're on top of the world as a 4-star quarterback at Ohio State and winning a national championship, and then he ends up in the Canadian Football League. And that's kind of where his career flames out, goes undrafted. So he's kind of seen the highs and the lows, and I think there's some valuable perspective there. And I just think having a quarterback coach that's younger will be someone that Caleb can relate to a bit more, and it can feel more like a player-to-player relationship instead of just a top-down, I'm a coach and I'm the one telling you what to do. Now, we don't have much of a track record here with JT Barrett because he's such a young coach, and because his whole coaching career has been in Detroit. We've only ever really seen Jared Goff as the Lions quarterback. I think in the last 3 seasons, Goff has not missed a game while Barrett has been coaching him there. I think, Hendon Hooker has gotten a couple garbage time snaps here and there, but we haven't even seen other quarterbacks get to step in and start any games for Detroit. So we don't have a lot of evidence of hey, here's the quarterbacks JT Barrett has developed. And I can feel some trepidation around the idea of is this the right coach to put with Caleb Williams, given how important it is to properly develop Caleb Williams? And I think for me, we need to remember that Ben Johnson as head coach and play caller is going to be very hands-on with Caleb Williams. His offensive coordinator is going to be hands-on with Caleb Williams. There's going to be a lot of minds and coaches working with Caleb. So it's not just like, all right, JT Barrett, you and Caleb go into the quarterback room and go make him into a Pro Bowler. Like, it's very much a group effort there. And JT Barrett's job is not to come up with the quarterback plan himself, but it's kind of to execute what Ben Johnson and the offensive coordinator, the rest of the staff are implementing for Caleb Williams. He's sort of the surrogate for the coach. When Ben Johnson can't be in the room, JT Barrett's there to, give him the instruction and to keep an eye on things and to push Caleb Williams in the right ways. But it's not as though Barrett's the only one who has any say on what Caleb Williams is going to become. And the other aspect of this is that when we think about developing and growing Caleb Williams, it's not as though he needs some sort of tear down and build up where it's like, okay, we got to redo the footwork and we got to redo the throwing motion and we got to fix all of these mechanics because they're all just wonky. Like, that's not really the case with him. Yes, the footwork needs to tighten up. The processing needs to speed up a little bit. Of course, like, mechanically, there is room for improvement from Caleb Williams, but this is not like a raw quarterback prospect that the new coaching staff has to try and mold and build up into some quarterback. Like, you already have a pretty strong foundation with Caleb. It's just about cleaning some little things up. But you don't need a quarterback's coach to come in and redo the whole mechanics and oversee the rebuilding of Caleb Williams' quarterbacking ability. It's more about perfecting something that's already off to a good start. And so that's where, to me, the quarterback's coach is an important hire, but it's also a bit less consequential than initially you might think. Like, on paper, it's like, yeah, the quarterback coach for Caleb Williams, oh my gosh, like, who's going to do that? This guy's young. He hasn't coached very much in the NFL. Like, are they giving him the right coaching? And then on the other hand, it's like, well, how much does Caleb need there? Or I guess how much of a specialty does Caleb need versus just everyone needs coaching, but like, he doesn't need some quarterback guru to come in and fix Caleb Williams. And honestly, like, that's more Ben Johnson's job anyway to get the most out of Caleb Williams. And JT Barrett's just here to sort of like help him along the way. So overall, I don't think this is like a big deal that way, but I like the idea of getting former players in there who have seen it and experienced it, and especially if you pair them with experienced coordinators, as it sounds like the direction Ben Johnson wants to go here, and even David Shaw from Stanford as a potential offensive coordinator would be interesting. Like, if those guys have a bunch of the experience and then they can sort of help coach up the coaches and develop these former players into better coaches along the way, like, that's how you have a sustainable coaching culture. Even if coordinators end up getting hired away, then guys are built up underneath them. And that's where I think Barrett is on the fast track there now that he takes over as quarterback's coach. Should mention he'll be coaching Tyson Bagent as well, or if Ben Johnson wants to go out and add another quarterback into the mix from a more experienced veteran, or certainly if they wanted to like draft somebody in the later rounds, like, that's all a real possibility here. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater is going to be a free agent from Detroit if they wanted to bring in a veteran here. So, JT Barrett can help bring Tyson Bagent along further as well and probably connect with him as, hey, undrafted quarterback, really got to try and prove your way and that how quickly everything can be taken away from you in your career. Like, I think he'll be a good influence on both of those guys. I'm a little more excited about wide receivers coach Antoine Randle, given some of the receivers he's worked with and the production he's been able to get out of guys. And I'm perhaps the most excited about defensive backs coach Al Harris. And I want to get to those two coaches, who they've worked with in the past and what kind of influence that can have in Chicago, who's going to benefit most from their coaching, next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new features can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. If you add the hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile picture, you can double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. JT Barrett is going to get a lot of supervision and, oversight. That's the word I was looking for. Oversight from Ben Johnson and the offensive coordinator. I think some of the other position coaches won't be quite as hands-on with the guys above them, like wide receivers coach and offensive passing game coordinator Antoine Randle L. He's going to be a little bit more on his own of like, you got to coach the receivers because Ben Johnson's coaching the whole team and trying to keep an eye on the quarterbacks and all that stuff. Wide receivers are under Randle L. And Randle L is another former player. You may remember him from throwing a pass. I believe it was a touchdown pass in the Super Bowl, if I remember correctly. He has a great career passer rating. I think he was a college quarterback for a while at Indiana and then transitioned to wide receiver. Played for the Steelers for a few years, then Washington for a few years, and then I think came back to the Steelers at the end, but won a Super Bowl in Pittsburgh, was a Pro Bowl wide receiver, was really good in college as well. Like, he has a great combination of experiences there as a receiver, as a quarterback, as a player who's a little bit more undersized and kind of had to work hard to get his way up to being, the player that he became in his career. I mean, yeah, he was a second-round pick, so it wasn't like he was, some kind of bum coming in, but, 5'10", 5'9.5", 185 pounds, was not this big-bodied wide receiver that every team really wanted to go out and get. But he had a fine NFL career and then got into coaching more recently. Spent the last, 21, 22, 23, 4 seasons with the Detroit Lions as their wide receivers coach. So obviously, in Detroit, coaching the likes of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. But even around them, the Lions didn't always have great other wide receiver talent. And JT Barrett, and Antoine Randle was able to get more production out of some of the other guys in Detroit as well. Before they drafted Jameson Williams, or when Williams was suspended, they have guys like Josh Reynolds they brought in as a free agent, or they've had a small slot receiver named Khalif Raymond for a while. And Raymond is another one of these 5'9", 5'8" guys who has always kind of been a special teams guy, but Randle L and of course Ben Johnson as well have helped Khalif Raymond play up to a number 3 receiver level. He's had a couple of seasons here with 600 yards receiving in Detroit, mostly before Jameson Williams came in and took a lot more of the share of targets and opportunities there. But they could take somebody like Khalif Raymond and get some pretty good production from him. They could take Josh Reynolds, who's always kind of just a guy, with the Rams and had trouble sort of emerging there, and comes to Detroit and they can get 600 yards out of him. Again, they're not making these guys into 1,000-yard receivers, but they're at least taking lesser-known players and squeezing more production out of them when you have talent at the top like Amon-Ra St. Brown, like Jameson Williams. Amon-Ra St. Brown was a 4th-round pick, but he had almost 1,000 yards as a rookie. I don't know that I give Randle L full credit for developing Amon-Ra St. Brown per se, but certainly he has coached him and helped him keep getting better from his rookie year until now. And I think more importantly, you've seen Antoine Randle L coach quality players across his career. So he's been around really good wide receivers and he knows what greatness looks like. Obviously he played the position himself, so he knows how the position works, but he's seen how different guys do it different ways, but all well in their own ways. So before he came to the Detroit Lions, you may not know this, Antoine Randle got his coaching start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2019 when they had Jameis Winston. And that was the year Jameis Winston threw 33 touchdowns and 30 interceptions and had 5,000 yards passing. Jameis went bonkers and was just throwing the ball all over the field, but also a bunch of interceptions. Throwing to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Randle he wasn't the wide receivers coach in Tampa specifically. He was just an offensive assistant, but he got to be around wide receivers, and certainly him being a wide receiver himself, I'm sure he worked a lot with the wide receivers there. And so he got to see how Mike Evans does business and gets 1,000 yards every year. He got to see how Chris Godwin carries himself and the way he prepares himself as a receiver. In his second season in 2020, the Buccaneers brought in Tom Brady and won a Super Bowl. So Antoine Randle has coached on the sidelines with Tom Brady. He's seen how Tom Brady goes about excellence. He has seen winning across the board. He is a winner as a player. He is a winner as a coach. He knows how to handle success, what success looks like and doesn't look like, how to handle if a team is in the Super Bowl. He has a Super Bowl as a player and a Super Bowl as a coach. He has been through that stuff, so that if the Bears were to ever be in one of those kind of positions, you have guys who've been through it before, literally, as both a player and a coach, so that Antoine Randle can go to Rome Odunze and really guide him and say, I've seen how this is done. And then he can lend his guidance to DJ Moore, who's already an established player, but be like, hey, man, I've seen how Mike Evans kept it going and sustained his career for so long. And I've seen how Tom Brady prepares. Like, Randle can lend that to Caleb Williams as well. Randle Ellis played quarterback himself. Like, there's some crossover here where you just feel like these coaches bring such a nice experience to this Bears roster that can go a long way. Whether you bring back Keenan Allen or not, like, you have now a veteran receiver in the room in Randle L, who's not a player, but at least has been around the block a little bit here. I mean, Randle L's, he's 45, so he's not a young man who can go out there and play anymore, but he still is a good quality coach, and I think he's going to go a long way for Rome Odunze. Maybe he can squeeze some more out of Tyler Scott. We feel like we haven't really seen him grow and get better that much in the past couple seasons. Or if Colin Johnson finds a way to stick around, the training camp hero from this past season, can Antoine Randle unlock a little bit more from him? And can they just get more out of this receiving core if they let Keenan Allen go and you come back next season with DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Tyler Scott, Colin Johnson, DeAndre Carter, like, somebody's going to need to step up in that number 3 role. And can Randle L and Ben Johnson get, a Josh Reynolds or Khalif Raymond level production from Tyler Scott? I mean, 600 yards from Tyler Scott would be really impressive. I mean, for his career so far, he's come nowhere close to that. It's not like, wow, oh my gosh, they've unlocked some monster, but it's just like, wow, that's good progress and good development for a player. Like, that's what I want to see from Randle L. We know DJ Moore is going to be good. We know Rome Odunze is going to be a good player. But can he squeeze some more out of those number 3 and number 4 receivers so the Bears can invest more in the offensive line and not have to go out and get either re-sign Keenan Allen and pay him to a lot of money, or go out and add other receivers? Like, get more out of the guys that you have, and you should have a good enough receiving core compared to what Ben Johnson was used to in his time in Detroit. So I think there's a lot of reason to trust Randle L, and he's a guy who could develop into an offensive coordinator someday. I wonder if within the next couple of seasons, if he gets hired away somewhere else to be an OC, or if the Bears OC gets hired away to be a head coach somewhere, if he could be an offensive coordinator in waiting on this coaching staff. And I wonder if Al Harris on defense is kind of a defensive coordinator in waiting as well. He's been an ascending coach in the NFL who's coached DBs to some really, really strong seasons on multiple teams. I know it's going to be weird having a former Packer on the Bears sideline, but I want to go through a pretty darn impressive background of coaching for Al Harris and what this means for the current Bears defensive backs next on Locked On Bears. Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens in the game, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, now that's icing on the cake. Download the FanDuel app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win that first $5 bet, you're going to score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. It was interesting to see Ben Johnson go out and hire a defensive assistant coach before officially securing his defensive coordinator. Everything is, Dennis Allen's going to be the Bears defensive coordinator. Like, there's a reason why that came out right away, and then everything slowed down, because you can't just pick a guy. That's why the whole Eberflus and Dallas thing got all blown up, because you can't just hire a guy. You got to go through a full process. So, I think that Al Harris was hired with the understanding that Dennis Allen is going to be his defensive coordinator, barring something crazy disrupting it, which I guess the Liam Cohen thing in Jacksonville and Tampa it shows you that weird stuff can happen, I suppose. But like, Al Harris comes in as DB's coach and then also defensive passing game coordinator to give him kind of a promotion. I don't think he needed to get a promotion because Dallas's coaching staff is turning over anyway, so I don't know if they needed to give him the promotion to pull him away or not, but he was assistant head coach and DB's coach in Dallas, so they kind of gave him defensive passing game coordinator to give him something else to come to the Bears here and feel like he's advancing in his career. But like, he has coached some very good defensive backs over his career. Spent the last 5 seasons in Dallas as defensive backs coach. But prior to that, he spent 6 seasons, with the Kansas City Chiefs under Andy Reid and defensive coordinator Bob Sutton. And so, like, starting right away in, I think it was 2013, he was assistant secondary coach and then became DB's coach later on in his career. But when Al Harris was there, initially he got to work with a bunch of veterans in that secondary, Brandon Flowers and Eric Berry. And you remember Eric Berry being a Pro Bowl safety there, and Flowers and some of the other veterans there were really solid DBs for Kansas City for a while there. But while Al Harris is there coaching DBs, the Chiefs go along and draft a cornerback by the name of Marcus Peters, who turned out to be one of the best cornerbacks in football for, at least the first, number of years of his career. He is still technically in the NFL. I think he's with the Dolphins right now, or spent his last season, his career wrapped up. I'm thinking of somebody else. Anyway, he was a Pro Bowler right away as a rookie with the Chiefs. Had 8 interceptions and 2 pick sixes that first year. He led the NFL in a bunch of ways, and 6 the next year, 5 the next year. He was just a turnover machine in Kansas City before he jumped over to the Rams, and then things kind of dropped off a little bit from there, and his career went there. But like, these are really quality DBs in Kansas City. They ended up acquiring Kendall Fuller from Washington as well, who played really well in Kansas City. Like, not that Al Harris was the reason Marcus Peters was great. He was great right away as a rookie. Like, he coached these guys while they were at a high level. And again, like, a variety of different guys, cornerbacks, safeties, young guys, veterans, guys that are a little bit more press man-to-man coverage guys who are a little bit more off-ball zone guys. Like, he's seen it all at a high level. Then he goes to Dallas, comes there in 2020 when they draft Trayvon Diggs in the second round. He's obviously an instant rookie sensation. Although, it's worth noting, like, as a second-round pick, I don't think anyone thought Trayvon Diggs was going to come in right away as a rookie and have, the instant success that he had. I mean, like, 3 interceptions as a rookie and then 11 his second year in 2021, made the Pro Bowl and, led the NFL and all that stuff. Like, I think Al Harris deserves some real credit for that. All the credit? Absolutely not. But some credit for helping oversee the development of Trayvon Diggs. And then they drafted Deron Bland in the 5th round in 2021, I think, or 2022. And Deron Bland leads the NFL in pick sixes and has a huge season. Like, we've seen cornerbacks break out in Dallas and in Kansas City under the tutelage of Al Harris. And so if I'm Jalen Johnson, I'm excited because we got, a good DB coach who played a little bit like Jalen Johnson does, right? Like, physical bump and run corner who likes to get in people's faces and annoy them up and down the field. Like, that's Jalen Johnson. That's Tyreek Stevenson too. Like, if anybody can unlock Tyreek Stevenson, it's got to be Al Harris here, right? Like, a player who I remember Al Harris being a little bit, having some of those kind of characteristics of Tyreek Stevenson in terms of being a talker, not being afraid to push the receiver's buttons a little bit and maybe draw a flag because the receiver gets so mad because Al Harris is kind of getting under his skin a little bit. Like, I think there can be some real coach to player bonding there where Harris can see a lot of himself in Stevenson and vice versa and unlock more from the second round pick than the Bears have seen. Because this year, Stevenson really fell out of favor. I mean, obviously the Hail Mary stuff in Washington, but even beyond that, just they were rotating in with 5th round pick Terrell Smith, another guy who's going to benefit a lot from Al Harris. But Stevenson's play, we haven't seen him really get better year over year. I mean, there's baby steps, but he hasn't taken that big step, and it's going to be up to Al Harris to be able to try and get him in that big step. And then Harris is going to be tasked with figuring out what the future of the safety position looks like for the Bears. Jaquan Brisker, entering the final year of his rookie deal, has had concussion after concussion after concussion, missed a lot of time. We're going to see how this year plays out and then decide from there what's going to happen with Brisker. But Kevin Byard, is he going to be back, or do they make him a salary cap casualty? I'm assuming the Bears are going to draft some kind of safety or something this year because you don't really have a heir apparent there. Elijah Hicks has never really taken that step. Jonathan Owens kind of struggled this year. The safety position is interesting because everyone's under contract right now, and yet we have no idea what it's going to look like for the next couple of seasons, what Brisker's future looks like, what Byard's future look like, what any of the backups are going to be. It's an interesting spot for Harris to have his hands on. And obviously, presumably Dennis Allen is going to be a big part of that process as well as defensive coordinator. And it's not just Al Harris being the only one solely responsible for this position, but I like the experience he's had. He's been across multiple teams. He's worked with great safeties and great cornerbacks. And it took me a minute. I was like wondering, I was like, okay, he coached in Dallas and Kansas City. Why is where's the Ben Johnson connection? Like, how does Ben Johnson know Al Harris, and why is he bringing him into Chicago all of a sudden? Like, they just heard good things about him, but turns out there is a connection. Al Harris's coaching career actually started in 2012, before he was with the Chiefs. He was a coaching intern in 2012 with the Miami Dolphins. And while Al Harris was a coaching intern, Ben Johnson was in his first or second season in Miami as an offensive assistant. And so they were on staff together as basically interns together for 1 year in Miami. And I'm guessing that stuck with Ben Johnson all this time. And I don't know exactly the Al Harris Dennis Allen connection there. That one wasn't super abundant to me, but I think not every coach underneath the coordinator has to have a connection to that coordinator. As long as he's got the head coach connection, that to me is what's most important. It's not just, hey, we share an agent. I think this is a really smart coach, and I think you guys should work together because I'm the head coach, and I'm ultimately the one who has final say over all of this stuff. And so I'm excited to see what Al Harris can do. I'm excited to see what Antoine Randle can do, what JT Barrett does. I always think about we should judge these assistant coaches by how players do or don't get better year over year, season over season. Not that like every player has to be better in 2025 or else these are bad coaches, but like I think about some of the previous assistants in Chicago. I think defensive line coach Travis Smith was really good at getting guys like Gervon Dexter to play better, getting guys like DeMarcus Walker to play better. The Bears developed defensive linemen with Travis Smith. Whereas like offensive line coach Chris Morgan, we never really saw offensive linemen get better in Chicago. We didn't see Braxton Jones take a huge step. We didn't see Tevin Jenkins take big steps. We didn't see Doug Kramer take steps. We didn't see Karana Magaji play well. We just haven't seen younger offensive linemen develop in Chicago. And to me, that's the sign of a position coach not doing a great job. So I will judge Al Harris based on how Tyreek Stevenson and Terrell Smith and other young DBs get better or don't. We'll judge Antoine Randle on how does Rome Odunze get better? Does Tyler Scott get better? These players keep improving. Certainly, JT Barrett and Caleb is going to be a little bit harder to kind of judge one-on-one, but if Bagent keeps getting better, and if we do see Caleb Williams' improvement, Barrett's going to play a role in that. So all these assistants are particularly important positions. I really want to see who the offensive line coach is going to be. That one, we've seen some names floated out there. Nothing is official yet, but that's going to be a big one. That's probably the next most important thing, other than actually the coordinators themselves, but like offensive line coach is going to be a hugely important hire for this Bears team, and I'm excited to see who Ben Johnson pulls in here. I also want to do deeper dives on the Bears coordinators. We're going to talk to Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints about Dennis Allen and what we could expect from a Dennis Allen defense in Chicago. That's going to be coming up this week on the podcast. But this week, I'm going to be down in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl, college football scouting event where a bunch of the top prospects from across the country are all going to get together. Ben Johnson will be down there. Ryan Poles will be down there. I'm sure we'll get to hear from them a little bit, and we'll get to know some of these draft prospects. So we're going to do some NFL draft talk with you this week on Locked On Bears, get to know some pass rushers, some offensive linemen, guys that are going to be in the mix for the Bears with their, 4 picks in the top 75 of this draft. Should be a good time and going to be a lot of really good players down there. So I won't be in the studio. I'll be on the road, but we'll still have the podcast for you coming 5 days a week. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Keep making Locked On Bears your first listen, whether I'm at the home studio or on the road down in Mobile. I'll still make sure to find time to give you another opportunity to bear down.